Hello everyone. In this tutorial, we will take a look at one of the more unique parts of the multi-state character controller by Imitation Studios. Rail systems are incredibly open-ended and can either be very simple or extremely complex as the situation requires. This video will cover the basics of setting up a simple rail system. For more detailed information, please refer to the documentation included in the package. Rail systems, in their simplest sense, linearly translate the player along a predefined path. From this starting point, we can have the camera move along its own path in relation to the player. Or for that matter, we can have many other objects, including meshes, lights, particle systems, or just about anything else, all move along their own paths. Rail systems only require 3 items to function. A game object with the multi-state movement rail system script. At least 2 empty game objects, serving as path waypoints, and parented to the first waypoint. And finally, 2 trigger bounds with the rail system cap script, which serve as the latch and unlatch points. The first step in creating a rail system from scratch is to create an organized hierarchy. In this example, I will create 3 separate rail systems with 3 separate paths. One rail system will be for the player, which would make it the primary system. Another rail system will be for the camera. This would be a secondary rail system, since the player does not directly interact with it. The last rail system in this example will be for a simple cube mesh, that will also serve as our player's rotation target. I have named the 3 game objects that will contain the rail system script component, rail system player, camera, and cube. I have also added 5 waypoints to the player's rail system, with the starting waypoint being the parent of the others. Now, I will add the rail system script to the player rail system, and assign my starting parent waypoint to the starting waypoint parameter. With the waypoint assigned, I can now position my waypoints. Notice the yellow line gizmo that is drawn between the waypoints. This line shows the path's absolute position. If you want the player to corner softer than the hard angles displayed, make sure the absolute positioning parameter of the rail system script is disabled. See the documentation for more information. One thing to note is that the player is not affected by gravity when interacting with rail systems. Next, we can assign the rail system cap script and collider to the ends of the system. Please note that this script does not need to be attached to a waypoint, as long as the player will contact the trigger bounds appropriately. Make sure to assign the rail system script to the cap script. Rail system caps can serve as latch points, unlatch points, or both, and are activated only when the player first enters the trigger's bounds. A rail system's duration defines the length of the rail system. A value of 0 would be located at the starting waypoint, and a value equal to that of the duration would be located at the final waypoint. Rail systems have 2 common control methods, input-based and time-based. Input-based movement is based on key axis input defined by the key axis parameter. Time-based movement is, of course, based off time. Don't forget to refer to the documentation if you don't know what a parameter controls. Notice the player's Y position in relation to the system. This is the rail system's default position, but this might not always be apparent if there is a collider below the player. In either case, it is very important to adjust the player's position in the rail system parameters. Be aware of the fact that the rail system caps may trigger camera collisions if the layers are not set up properly. Next, we can take a look at some of the rotational settings of the player. Up to this moment, we have been using the default, unrestricted rotation. Our other options are, to lock our character's rotation, have him face the next waypoint, or even rotate towards a transform, which will be the rotation setting we use in this video. I'm going to modify one of the camera's parameters to eliminate that slight camera movement. We can assign our primitive cube to our player's rotation target and set the system to use it in the dropdown. Next, let's take a look at our first secondary rail system, our cube system. The setup for a secondary rail system is different from a primary rail system in two regards. They do not contain rail system caps, and they require a game object to serve as the dolly, which in our case, will be a primitive cube. What is a dolly? Simply put, a dolly is a game object that responds to movement in another system. For example, if our player moves to position 5 in its rail system, the connected dolly will move to position 5, along its own separate rail system and path, assuming that the dolly is using its default settings, but we will get more into that later. Because the dolly has its own path, we will need to create a second path, using the same process as we had for the primary path. If you duplicate the primary path, like I did, make sure to delete the rail system caps as they are not needed in a secondary system, and may even cause problems. Let's add the on-rail dolly script to our cube. Next, we assign the secondary rail system, not the primary, to our dolly's parameter. Dollies have their own rotation settings. Be sure to check out the documentation for more information. Now, I can assign our cube dolly to the dollies list parameter of the primary system. Notice that the player is still rotating towards the cube. A dolly's position resets when the player stops interacting with the rail system. Dollies not only have their own rotation settings, but can also modify their own position value. Again, be sure to take a look at the documentation for more information. Next, we will add a camera dolly. The setup for a camera dolly is almost the exact same as any other secondary system, except that the dolly should not contain a mesh that might block the camera's view. And the camera dolly must be specifically marked as such in the primary system's parameters. You might want to adjust the multiplier value of the camera dolly, depending on its path, to set the camera a little behind the player. Back in the primary system parameters, add the camera dolly to the generic dolly list. Enable camera dollies. And specify the index of the camera dolly in the generic dolly list. Notice how the camera is much further ahead of the player. This is because I forgot to change the duration of the camera's rail system from 10 to 20. This means that when the player reaches the halfway point, the camera will be at the end of its system. Finally, we can change the player's animation. Rail systems set an animator trigger, specified by the primary system, when first attached. From there, you can adjust the animator to be as simple or complex as you desire. Check out the Unity documentation on animators for more information. Animator states for rail systems are recommended to have two exit transitions. One is for the on-rails bool, which tells the animator when the rail system has reached its natural conclusion. Another transition is for the rail exit trigger, which may be called at any time by custom methods. That will conclude this introduction to rail systems. From here, be sure to check out the documentation for information on positional events, where the true power of rail systems become apparent. If you have any questions, you can email us at support@imitationstudios.com. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.